Hello, and welcome to another episode of Yell Fire, Conversations to Combat the Lie of White Supremacy. I'm your host, Craig Pelkey-Landis, random white dude, author of A Brief History of White Nonsense. Let's jump right in. My guest today is Laurie Harding, Dr. Laurie Harding, and through her company, Insight Indigenous Anti-racism Services, she's an educator, facilitator, and coach to settler people regarding the impact of Canada's historic and current colonial realities, including systemic racism and socialized bias. So she basically teaches settler people uh, about the realities of indigenous-based racism. So we have a lot in common, Laurie and I. We're both white settlers living in very different parts of colonized North America. I'm here in traditional lands of the Isleta Pueblo people, and Laurie has a really interesting story that I want you to hear about how she got started in this work. She was having a conversation with an Indigenous elder who she was working with at the time, who invited her to teach her people, teach the settler people, the realities of uh, systemic racism in Canada. So that's what she's dedicated her life to since then. So really excited to have you get in on this conversation. Please like and subscribe, leave comments wherever you're listening to or watching this. And thanks for joining in. Take care. All right. Well, Laurie Harding, welcome to Yell Fire. We're really excited to jump into this conversation. Um, Thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure, Craig. So happy for the invite. Thank you.
So let's jump in with just telling us a little bit about yourself, about your work in. I'm interested in indigenous specific anti-racism because that's not an area where, a ton of people are that I know of are working. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
Oh, thanks so much. I feel like, how much time do you have? This is my responsibility as a white settler with
Mhm.
Scottish and English colonial ancestry occupying Cowichan territory, colonially
Mhm.
known as Shawnigan Lake in BC on Vancouver Island, so in
Okay.
Canada. And I appreciate considering and thinking about the gaps and the erasure of Indigenous people in anti-racism scholarship in general. And my thesis, I looked at that. I have in my chapter on the literature review. I noted that difference of I was learning about anti-racism and saw the advanced scholarship in the U.S. in white supremacy, even learning about and talking about racial identity development with Helms, with other people, and getting to the necessity of Indigenous specific anti-racism has been my focus, and working with Indigenous organizations for at least 18 years. That's been my identity, is looking at my identity as a white settler. So going from white identity development to white settler identity development while
Mm,
occupying Indigenous lands. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's where
Um,
I start. Yeah.
okay, cool, cool. So not not everybody kind of gains an awareness and then does something about it. So I'm kind of doing a little doing a podcast. I wrote a book and you're doing this work. How did you so that's how I came to kind of be a little more activist in my approach to getting beyond just realizing the uh, the challenges faced by people that don't look like me, that who are racialized differently than I am, and the benefits that I have as a white male in this culture. So, how did Can you tell us a little bit about how you went from oh wow this shit is happening to I want to devote myself to
Mm,
this.
yeah. Good question. And people ask me or give me kudos like for doing this work, and I think I'm just talking about the truth. You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
been, I'm no, I specialize in this area. I'm no expert. I live and breathe and have white supremacy in my DNA. So
Hmm.
I began this work back in 2003 when I worked for Cowichan Tribes as a child safety social worker. And
Okay.
I was the only white social worker. And the first time I was out of my white cultural comfort zone, not
Hmm.
being the dominant group in this work and
Yeah.
learning so profoundly. And I remember sitting at a boardroom table and being profoundly impacted by the stories that I was hearing and recognizing the incredible contrast
Mm.
in the benefits that I had as a white person growing up with health, access to health, to education, to family. The Indigenous people that I knew, many people were removed from
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
by settler state. So I knew then that I was my experience was completely different, and
Hmm.
I had some outrage at the inequities,
Yeah.
and I knew I had to just stay and listen because I had these my amygdala was firing. It was like flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. What do I do
Yeah.
here? I'm so triggered.
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
stayed because of being granted the honor of being invited to do the work with that community. So
Yeah.
the elders there and colleagues and staff, like Lise Haddock, I said, "Why did you invite me here?" And she said, "I thought you could handle it." So we're still
That's
very close
that's
friends.
awesome. I
Yeah,
love
so
that.
the fragility there, recognizing that intuition to be fragile,
Mm.
it was a physical response. Like my hands clench, I
Huh.
lean back, shortness of
Wow.
breath, go,
Yeah, yeah. No, I
holy. So
understand that.
flash forward uh, many years. I've only worked for Indigenous organizations since that point, and I
Okay.
recognize my role as, I call myself a backup singer. I don't know these realities. I'm only learning them,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
talked to my people. An elder told me to go teach my people when I did a master's in social work with an Indigenous specialization,
Mm.
and and then working for the Provincial Health Services Authority, I was asked to teach my people. And I remember that my people and going, oh, yeah, they are. And I am those people.
Hmm. Hmm.
So starting to see that as my identity, my responsibility,
Wow.
and recognizing and hearing from Indigenous mentors and leaders that I was needed to do the work. Come on, Laurie, show up. You can do this. And they'll listen to you. So yeah,
Yeah.
as a white settler, an Indigenous colleague I could be teaching with, and the class would, did it look to me
Yeah.
for answers, and I would
Okay.
say, "This is the expert in the room."
Right. Right.
I remember working with Dr. Cheryl Ward. She's Namgis from Alert Bay Island from here, and she mentored me through many years. And then there have been many mentors through the years, and knowing that I needed to shut up and listen and learn was kind of
Yeah.
a necessary part of that engagement.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's it's really interesting because I'm kind of at the beginning of a similar journey. Just with this podcast, my goal is to just to listen to your the second I had I interviewed two people about the coalition to dismantle the doctrine of discovery. They were white settlers, and you're my second guest who was just identifies as white. Um, but mostly, I try to listen to Black and Indigenous people and learn, like, use this as a platform to learn and listen, and hopefully others are listening in and learning as well. And the people of color who may be listening in can recognize and not learn, but hear from other experts and people and recognize, their own experience in that. So
Mm,
very cool.
absolutely.
I'm
Yeah, your
glad.
point about learning from Black and Indigenous people and that their voice matters. I often think whenever I open my mouth, um, what would a person that I know who's represented by that racialization think or say? Because
Mhm.
those are the measures that matter.
Yeah, exactly.
As
Exactly.
as
Yep.
you say, what would Yvette say? What would Cheryl say? What would Lise say? What would people say about this? And I'm not here if this isn't performative, which it
Hmm.
could be. People often do
Exactly.
that, come and do a performance.
Yeah.
I'm wearing an orange t-shirt. It's almost September, and thinking about the trigger points for Indigenous people as the weather changes for
Mm.
survivors of residential school here and I imagine boarding school in the US.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that consideration of how the land changes, and for me, excitement for kids going back to school and the contrast
Yeah, 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 yeah.
for my
Wow.
people. So,
Yeah, yeah. I'm on it's called the Story Sharing Committee for the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. And I'm sort of helping out, but others are writing an article about the experience of the boarding school and yeah, that experience and how that, that still reverberates today in people's lived, in people's bodies and physically and emotionally. So I appreciate that you're kind of you well, your just level of awareness uh is appreciated. So yeah.
and the contrast, I learned that this isn't voyeurism, learning about
Hmm.
harm that has happened to other people and
Right.
how that can be um, that scrutinization can be harmful, and that recognizing that this is our history too, wherever we
Hmm.
are on
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Indigenous
Yeah. Yeah.
lands. So it's not Indigenous history, it's
Yeah.
settler Indigenous
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
history. And I embody this history too, but in opposite ways. So
Yeah.
for the harms that Indigenous people experience, that is multi-generational, the multi-generational racism is embodied in me. My
Yeah.
parents
Yeah. Yeah.
came to Canada, so-called Canada, from Scotland and England. My mom
Mhm.
came in 1927. She
Oh,
was 4 years
wow.
old
Oh,
on a ship from Scotland. They were on a train across Canada, and the land prospectors got on with these posters about free land.
oh,
So,
wow.
being Scottish, they got on.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I've still got the poster. Well, I found it in the museum. Those
Yeah.
land prospector posters that were propaganda, racist
Yeah. No kidding.
propaganda.
Yep. Exactly. Wow.
Go
Wow.
on, bring people to Canada, but white people were the preferred, right?
Sure.
So,
Yep.
yeah, my
Wow.
dad came to Victoria, that's Matulia, the end at the bottom of this island, and he was born here.
Okay.
And I've gone back now to learn some more of that history, but it was so erased. Like none of this family history was available. I had to do work to go back to
Mm.
find, went to the preempted land that my mother's family had in Fort Fraser. Like all of this history is available. Settlers
Huh.
can go and find this and
Yeah.
track our own colonialism
Hmm.
in the timeline of our existence on Indigenous
Yeah.
lands.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, in my book, I refer to it as the unambiguous facts of history. Yeah, it's easy to find, and uh,
Mm.
people prefer to erase it or try to erase it, but the information is easily available, and you cannot reach any other conclusion other than that. Yeah, this is racism from the very beginning. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, I noticed you contributed a chapter to a book called White Benevolence, and I appreciate calling out what I call liberal racism, the kind of white man's burden kind of racism, like any other form of racism. So, um, and I think you did your thesis on this. So, how does white benevolence, or racism in general harm Indigenous people as they try to navigate healthcare systems. And this is so I'm interested in we
Okay.
in the US we have tremendous resources and a horrible, horrible, horrible healthcare system. So I'm interested in an enviable healthcare system on the surface, but how harms to Indigenous people occur in that system. So,
I appreciate your comment about on the surface. So that's the book right there, White Benevolence. That's what it looks like. And I co-authored the chapter with Dr. Barry Laurie.
yes. Hmm.
And he was my advisor on my thesis. So the
Okay.
thesis is what's the harm examining the stereotyping of Indigenous people in health systems. And for me as a white settler working for an Indigenous health organization in a provincial organization was eye-opening. I worked as a facilitator for 10 years, facilitating a discussion board on the stereotyping of Indigenous people in health systems. So every person, with 25 people in a cohort, came in every Monday. All had examples of stereotype harm that they could identify of Indigenous people in that they had observed. These are participants, so they all had post-secondary education, mostly like 95%. I did the demographic analysis on that, and it's in the thesis. And it was shocking, not shocking, but alarming to see how many comments that people had. And it was Cheryl Ward's brilliance creating that discussion board where white settlers and settlers or immigrant settlers, people of color had for the first time exposed what they've been seeing because it's secretive. We don't talk about race. I've been groomed not to talk about race. You know, I think of my family. If it's not right, not nice, don't talk about it. And I knew race was not nice. So I was full on exposed. I did a deep analysis. I had 3,000 examples. I did a 25% sample of that and read 1,500. And that was horribly mind-blowing. And I thought of the need for me as a white settler to do that analysis and the harm that that would cause to an Indigenous person to witness, because that information is familial, relational, and personally harmful too. So I thought, oh, should I be doing this? I'm white. Is this okay?
Oh, wow.
And then realized that I need to do this and that any harm or any reaction that I have is only from reading and learning. It's not my family's experience. I have the opposite family's experience. So I kept going, and I did. It was absolutely challenging. I had some crazy dreams about that horrible data, and realized while I was examining those data that I had been facilitating that for 10 years in groups of 25, and there was impacts that I hadn't recognized when I had with this huge data set. I heard people saying, this happens all the time. This is frequent. It's normal. So I hadn't seen the frequency identifiers in their comments until afterwards. And then looking at that, okay, so you all have seen this. You all have noted this. What did you do about it? What happened? And in the analysis, I think 2 people out of 333 that I honed it down to those examples that were really clear about Indigenous health, that they that it was stated in the comment, and that was the smaller group out of the 1,500 that I rendered down to use, but that was really powerfully impactful on me, and I felt like I have heard or learned the discourse of settler understanding of racism because I could hear how people were making sense of it. I could hear how they described it, what was going on. So I themed and coded, and and there's tables in that thesis if people want to look at that analysis. But
okay, sure, yeah, I
I'm
can
getting
share
over
that.
it. I'll never get over it, but I'm not as triggered by it, and I can speak to it based on a level of specialization now and was compelled to write that chapter in white benevolence, and that took that one narrow IV, I talk about it as an IV, into white supremacy and white benevolence, into how racism is coached into health systems. Because there were many people who said they wouldn't have recognized it as racism until they did that training, because it was so normal, so normalized, taught, and coached into health systems, into post-secondary education, into training for the colleges of medicine. So that chapter breaks it down and explains the language and how that has been normalized and taught into systems, and then people can sometimes go, oh wow, I said that, I didn't know it was racist. So that was the idea for that chapter.
Okay, yeah. And let me see if I have this right. It sounded like the indigenous people that you were interviewing and that were in this cohort saw what was happening but did not have recourse.
Yeah, really good question. It wasn't indigenous people.
Oh, okay.
I think it was 13%. The demographics are in there.
Okay,
Predominantly white.
Okay. But
service providers
I
who were
see.
exposing examples of harm. So but
Okay,
they know
gotcha.
they've seen this. And also in the examination, speaking to how they understood it was, the word unfortunate kept coming up, and I thought, this is
wow,
this is not a lack of fortune here. This is
right.
targeted, systemic harm that happens, as they said, every day. So the understanding of what they were seeing was why I was compelled to do that research.
Yeah, gotcha. Because they were seeing it and saying, well, and kind of shrugging, it sounds like. So, wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this kind of leads into this question. So people are recognizing disparities, harm happening. And so you're starting to help people recognize that and figure out maybe what to do about that. So what are some of the biggest barriers to settler folks grasping what you are trying to share with them, not just recognizing the harm, but reversing that, repairing, restoring justice to these systems?
Yeah. Lots of examples are flashing through my head of where people have come forward and want to do the work and then bail because it's not in my portfolio. This is another part of the organization. I remember not that long ago working with two brilliant Indigenous leaders doing a program for an Indigenous health organization, and they worked for their provincial health organization, one of the regions, and they didn't know what to do, or their white supremacy or white benevolence was getting in the way, because they would say, well, we'll do a framework because this is our work to do. We get the framework, go, oh, there's so much missing in this, and then we do the framework and they say, oh, that's too deep, that's too involved. And then people that are working in that organization that have been identified to provide support for that change leave. They go, they're bumped over to another area of their program. The CEO is gone now. Like it was like, what are we doing? Like, is this the way that white supremacy works in systems, that you need the people who have decision-making power. They need to recognize that Indigenous people need to have the last word, because they would give you ideas and then change it all up. And back, the IAP2 is a framework that's available. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's a guideline for engagement with community, and we worked on adapting that for working with Indigenous communities. And there's a 5-level ways of working. So people come, they send you an email. The Indigenous people in this organization get emails. We've got this idea to do this work. We've got a little bit of money. Can we send you some ideas? And you're going like, okay, this organization is completely capped, always underfunded, understaffed, and under-resourced, and brilliant, and has the answers. But you're going to come in here and want me to teach you and to assess that before we're going to do anything. So the starting place around relationships and recognition and upholding Indigenous sovereignty and Indigenous rights, like the terms of reference, understanding about Indigenous specific anti-racism literacy must be in place first, because otherwise it can be a waste of time for both organizations.
Yeah. Yes, systemic change, even at an organizational level, is challenging. 15 years ago, I was experiencing some hope in the U.S. around systemic change, but the last 10 years especially, I've become so aware of how pernicious and how clinging to power the lie of white supremacy is in the U.S. And I'm wondering, your experience, like my question that I wrote down was, so how are things in Canada? So a few years ago, I looked with interest at, there was Truth and Reconciliation Commissions and things like that. I thought, that sounds positive. But so from your perspective, how are things in Canada?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I remember when I've always been watching, and I teach this fall, I'll be teaching global or Indigenous global health. So we will be getting into Indigenous specific racism globally, and looking at the US. I've always watched and thought Dr. Cheryl Ward would say, when are we going to have our civil rights movement in Canada? So following and seeing the movement and the support for anti-Black racism. And so you're saying, what are you doing in Canada? How is that working? And the TRC, that's 10 years old. And there were I think there were 94 recommendations. And even the one recommendation that's around health, this is what we've been struggling with for all of these years. So the performativity of commissions, that's thousands of pages and volumes of work and hours, an immense amount of money. And then also, going back to RCAP, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples in 91. I have a son that was born in 91. He's 34. So thinking about his life, has that changed? Or would a young Indigenous man born on that year, would his life have changed because of RCAP, because of the TRC, because of the many, many resistance documents, the missing murdered Indigenous women report, all of those? There are tons of reports, and it gives even the apology by Prime Minister Stephen Harper years ago. That was paused. Like any Indigenous people, many know where they were at that time. So I was working in an office. We all sat in the boardroom, put it up. There was a lot of tears, and kind of a feeling of relief. Okay, that's been acknowledged and recognized by the highest leader in this country, and yet so. We also have new standards for health that recognize Indigenous specific anti-racism and Indigenous cultural safety and humility. So we have standards, we have apologies, we have volumes of work around this. My thesis was published in 2018. I had this idea that initially this has to be exposed. And even with the exposure, how is it being picked up by Joe Canada or Josephine Canada or whoever? So my kids, I teach them. I have grandchildren now. They're learning about this, and one ray of hope that this June was pretty impressive. My granddaughter turned 6 in March, and she was finishing grade 1, and their performance was built in collaboration with an elder, a Cowichan elder.
Oh, wow.
I know. So they learned some Hokaminam words, and it was about them being land defenders and about the water system where they were
yeah. Oh, cool. Wow, wow, wow. Yeah.
I just said, oh my God, am I feeding this? So I went and talked to the preschool teacher, and I said, oh wow, how did you come about this? She goes, oh well, it's my responsibility as a white settler occupying Cowichan land. I
Oh
just
my
said,
goodness.
hallelujah. Young woman
Wow.
took it upon herself to build that relationship. She says, we have tea once a week. And she's helping me learn about how I can integrate this knowing into relationships and seed and support the next generations.
Yeah. Wow. That's wonderful. Well, that's perfect. That's so I live in a part of the US where indigenous it's on indigenous radio stations and other places they even call it Indian country. So uh indigenous influence is hard to miss. So I live on unceded land of the Isleta Pueblo people. How do you suggest that white settlers engage with local indigenous communities? So, without being an asshole.
Brilliant question. I would be, there is a level or back to Dr. Cheryl Ward, a scaffolding process. So she created the Sanyas Indigenous Cultural Safety Program for that reason. It's sanyas.ca, and it's an online platform. That's the training that I wrote my research about. And
Okay.
so anybody can take that training. It's free for people that work in health authorities in BC. And that the scaffolding of that training, we need that foundational learning about ourselves in relationship with Indigenous people, our
Yeah.
history, and the contrast and comparison, and also to learn about and acknowledge the sovereign rights of the Indigenous peoples of the land we are walking on. So
Yeah.
that part, so that having some foundational literacy, Indigenous specific anti-racism literacy, before you go and meet with Indigenous communities, and also showing up. There's a walk every year here for National Indigenous Peoples Day. There will be an orange shirt walk as well, and that's anyone is invited, and we need to make an effort and show up. And because there's always stories afterwards,
Yeah.
and those stories are heartbreaking, they're tragic, and we need to respect and listen without it being an extractive process of learning about the harm. And I was speaking to another Indigenous person today about, okay, here we go, it's September. We're going to see the settlers getting their orange t-shirts on and taking selfies at these walks.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And thinking they've done something, put it on their Instagram or wherever that, I showed up. It's farthest from the truth.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, but all of this learning, and I think of the learning for me has happened in relationship with people who have granted me the honor of hearing and learning from them. And then the master's in social work I did was an Indigenous specialization with only Indigenous professors. So I was really it's lucky, or luck is not it's not about luck.
Yeah. Right.
It's about intentional learning and going to having some instinctive learning that this is right. I need to learn from this person, and sitting and listening and building relationship, and then finding out how settlers can show up. Where
Excellent.
I have, Indigenous leaders who will say, Laurie, you need to go talk to this person. Like my coaching business, I get all of my referrals have been from Indigenous people. I only take them from
Fantastic.
Indigenous people to go and work with a leader at a university or a staff colleague that is giving them a challenging time. So they recognize, they're so graciously recognizing this as a need for remedial education, which it is. And people can need that remedial education and be consciously deflecting, denying, rejecting, exiting from these conversations, and holding people to the fire of Indigenous specific anti-racism, can be done carefully. And I talk about myself, like I was born with this knowledge. I was born with the white benevolence, my the good white people.
Right.
So yeah, realizing that even in the process of calling people out, that I am that. I am always remembering that I am and have been deeply steeped in the history that they have been indoctrinated into.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's helpful. Yeah, I really try to remember that in my interaction. I think I need to have more grace in
Mm,
interaction with other white people who, who who are either resistant or don't just haven't learned uh,
mhm,
to the level that I've had the opportunities to learn. Um, so yeah, I've this is a good reminder for me because I've now heard from uh, a number of a couple of different people racialized in various ways that yeah, just uh be not necessarily be gentle with people, but understand where they're coming from and bring them along as best you can. And if they're not willing to, then that's on them. So
mm,
anyway, that's helpful for me to hear. Um, I will share some of the online resources that you mentioned. I'll share them when this comes out, so that people can gain access to those processes and systems that you talked about. Did I miss anything? Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
mm.
And
Yeah, I had a few notes, and then I love how this preparation for this, I was thinking, okay, how do I prepare for this? What are my main points I want to make sure everybody takes away? And
yeah.
yeah, Sandy Boucher, I did a podcast with her. So her YouTube podcast, the last was my first podcast. Had never done one before, and
Hmm.
the reception was poor. And I was thinking, oh, do you want to redo it? And she said, no, creator has a plan. And I thought, I thought you might say that it is the way it's meant to be. So following that organic nature of what's meant to be or for us to
Hmm.
discuss. And I always have this thought in my mind to consider and think of how will this land on Indigenous people and people of color. So
Hmm.
with much respect and also recognition that I will put my foot in my mouth.
Hmm.
With honor and respect for my teachers, recognizing their names and who they are and the long process, and that this doesn't happen overnight. And there are
Hmm.
people who I've seen who seem magneted to this, like just, oh, this is right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
see the truth. And I was thinking about this as in introducing ourselves and introductions as an opportunity and an act of transparency of sharing the razor sharp edge of truth of who we are
Hmm.
in this land. And for, Sandy was saying that for Indigenous people to hear that is um, is helpful, and to be validated that, oh my God, there are some white people out there who actually know who
Yeah,
they are,
yeah, yeah.
know how they benefit, and are willing to continue to go toe to toe to speak truth to power,
Yeah.
speak treason to these systems. Thinking about Tim Wise, I learned from him. I went to the 2009 White Privilege Conference, and
Oh,
I was
wow.
first white caucus in my life. It's like, wow, where are all
Huh.
the brown people? Who are
Wow.
we supposed to learn from here?
Oh.
And then realizing I have been programmed to learn from white people, white
Yeah,
settlers, and indeed who we are in relationship. Yeah, is the
yeah.
takeaway
Awesome. All
on
right.
the land.
Cool. Well, hey, you're starting to break up, so maybe creator is saying Time to wrap up. Wow. I so much, Laurie, I appreciate your time and your sharing your experiences and your knowledge. This has been a super enlightening conversation. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for the invite, and I'll put together. I've got a shitload of resources, and my website is where people can connect with me and my services. So
Yeah.
insightantracism.com.
Okay. Yes,
And that was
I'll
created to capture all the lessons I've learned from Indigenous people. So it's
awesome.
called Settler to Settler.
Okay. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent.
Thank
Well,
you. Greg.
thanks again. All right. Hey, thanks again for joining me here on Yellfire. Again, please like and subscribe, make comments, share with your friends. Appreciate you joining me here. Thanks again to my guest, Dr. Laurie Harding, and catch you next time. Thanks a lot.